Outstanding. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Spencer Giese. I'm a research education specialist at ACUHO. I'd like to welcome you all to week 11 of our virtual roundtable series. Today on our virtual roundtable, we'll be talking about preparing for fall, rethinking campus mail service centers. Today's session is in partnership with Quadience and is a topic that I can tell is top of mind for many of you. We had over 200 registrants for today, and we're excited to have a lively discussion and really help share some knowledge across the field. Along with today's session, this week's entire virtual roundtable slate is brought to you in partnership with ACUHO and Quadient. So thank you to Quadient for this partnership and their product Parcel Pending by Quadience. Yesterday we had a virtual roundtable for our Professionals of Color network. Today we have our session with Parcel Pending by Quadience. Tomorrow we have a session for senior housing officers, and on Friday our Women in Housing Network is putting on a session. So honestly, a great slate of virtual roundtables here in week 11. And be sure to visit our webpage, our YouTube channel, and take a look at our resources that ACUHO is putting on. So really all of these resources that we bring to you are by membership dollars. So your membership really helps fuel our ability to provide resources and to provide research for this field. So thank you all for being members of ACUHO. Take a look at our virtual roundtables on YouTube, our threads on the online community, and then our dedicated COVID-19 webpage. Before we get started with our session today, I want to do a quick audio-visual check. Right now, you should be seeing a slide deck with today's moderator and panelists, and hopefully you're hearing me loud and clear on your audio. If you are having such luck and video and audio is coming through for you, if you could just raise your hand and let us know that that is all functioning well. Excellent. Thank you for being active participants in our session today. And now you know where the raised hand function is. So if our panel works with you today and they'd like to have you raise your hand based on a question, be ready for that. Also, the raised hand function is a great way to get the attention of our moderator to potentially ask a question. So please be mindful if you're hitting that raised hand function. And speaking of our moderator, without further ado, I do want to send it over to Michelle, the VP of Marketing for Parcel Pending. Michelle, thank you for moderating the day. We're happy to work with you.
Thank you, Spencer. It's a pleasure to be here. And so thank you everyone for joining us in today's roundtable, Preparing for Fall, Rethinking Campus Mail Service Center. As we know that this COVID-19 pandemic has certainly disrupted and also impact our higher education environment. And that's why today we gathered a panel of experts around the country to help us understand more around some of the solutions, and then also how can higher education institutions leverage technology to help enhance the experience and then also operational gains, and as well as some of the mitigating some of the financial risk here in combating this pandemic. So before we actually go into our roundtable discussion, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the experts that we have that's joining us today, starting with Mr. Christopher O'Brien, who is the Executive President for Quadient. Chris comes to us with over 35 of experience in many roles involving automating business workflows, and including launching the higher education division at Quadient several years ago, which focuses on parcel and mail solution for the nation's largest and elite institution. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Michelle.
Then the next expert we have joining us today is Mr. Dan Graney, who is our Senior Solutions Engineer. Dan is the engineer and devoted and dedicated to the higher education vertical within the Quadient family. He has over 11 years of experience focusing on various logistics solutions serving colleges and universities across the nation. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Michelle.
And
Good to be here.
last we have Mr. John White. John is the Director of University Housing from Case Western Reserve University. For those of you that are familiar with Case Western, they are a private research university based in Cleveland, Ohio. They were established since 1826, and they currently have over 12,000 students active on campus. And John, being the Director of University Housing, comes to to us with over 40 years of experience in higher education. He oversaw the conference program and assignment area of 12,000 students at Texas A&M University, and prior to that, also at Texas State University, as well as the finance and technology at Texas State as well. He then moved to University of Texas at San Antonio to start their very first residential program, which started with 1,000 beds, and then not only he was able to double that, but in fact he then increased their capacity of beds to 2,600 beds when he left. So it's a true pleasure to have an expert as yourself, John, to join us in our panel today.
Thank you.
So just a reminder about today's session, as Spencer previously mentioned, it is a panel discussion that our panelists will be sharing with you on some of the expertise and then also the trends that they've been seeing, and then also the solutions that they have adopted. We welcome you to engage with us through the Q&A session at the end of this roundtable. You can utilize the Q&A session on the Zoom menu, where you have also utilized when you raise your hand when Spencer was initiated the call. Please make sure that you include your name, your position, the name of your institution, and then your question, so we can thoroughly address your inquiries. But with that being said, let's go ahead and kick it off. The first question I have is for Chris. Previously, I read a report about a couple of weeks ago. 13 million students have actually been impacted in the last 60 days due to the COVID-19 pandemic. That just seems like an incredible amount of students, and then also lives being disrupted. Tell us a little bit more about the current state in higher education based on your interaction with the business and then also the clients that you serve.
Sure, Michelle. Happy to do that. And a couple things before I get right to that question is, just from a naming convention, some of you might know us as Neopost, which we are now Quadient. And we've had the pleasure, of course, of acquiring and working with the parcel pending team that's really been predominant in the U.S. in terms of lockers. But one other thing to share is you can see a baseball in the background. So I have to tell you, I have my crutch because it's this time of year that I'm missing my favorite sport. So I'll have my security blanket while I talk with my baseball in my hand, since I don't get to follow my team. But to the question at hand, it's interesting because everybody on this call has probably seen so many changes and impacts to the college experience over the last decade. And I share that knowledge with the experience I've had. So I have 4 kids, but 3 of them are in their 30s. And I have one who is now a junior, just finished his junior year. And I must admit, it is a very different experience from my first 3 that went to school 10 and 12 years ago to what is taking place today, which makes this an even greater impact. And if you want to know what I mean by that, I got introduced to the first time 2 years ago at the school where my son attended to the parents' freshman Facebook page. And I was a little bit eye-opening in terms of the comments that were coming in about the parents' requests for certain things that needed to be done to make sure that the student had the proper experience. And to me, that made a big challenge for people that are creating the student experience. It became much more of a higher factor these days. But to Michelle's point at hand about today, of course, what's happening today makes it even more interesting and dramatic. So from the 4 different things that we looked at is what we hear from our colleagues and our friends in your roles is that there's a big thing first and foremost about safety. That's the #1 topic we hear. How do I make it safe for the students? How do I make it safe for my staff? So that if we do and when we do get on campus, that we feel good about the environment that they're coming to. And there's a ton of talk about that. Right behind it, of course, is the dramatic impact of revenue flows. We've heard many stories about how funds have been shifted. First, to refunds for those that had to leave campus, that had refunds for housing. I think Penn State had over $1 million in terms of refunds that needed to kick out, and that's probably common across the country. And the second was the investment of virtual learning capabilities. So all of a sudden, the challenge that everybody has is how do I make it safe? But how do I do it also with maybe less funds than I had to my original budget that was put together? And the bottom two areas are areas that we thought we may be able to help on. And that is, how does the operational procedures change to do those two things? How do you make them safer? But also, how do you do them within a budget that you can work with? And lastly, what specific areas of focus can somebody actually have an impact on that can be made a change and a change of behavior in a short amount of time? And before I go to the next slide, Michelle, one thing that has been very challenging for us is we have ideas from our experiences with people on this call and people that have been running auxiliary services, people that have been working within the mail services, and they're ideas that we like to share, but we're also very sensitive because I'm sure most people say it's not at the top of their list right now. There are other factors that need to take place in terming satisfying the students, budgets, strategies. So we've been a little bit cautious on how do we get our communication. And we had some great help because we created an advisory board within people in the college universities' roles in housing and mail services that we've looked for guidance so that we're not just another email that says we can help you during COVID-19 that I'm sure all of you have a inbox full of. So hopefully we can share some ideas with that. And if we can go to the next slide, Michelle. So this has been distributed, I think, just last week about where does each college and university stand on bringing students back in the fall. And 65% are planning to do that, although I'm sure there's many changes. But there's still people that are undecided. And of course, a lot of talk about a hybrid model. And what I'd like to do is introduce Dan Greeny. And Dan works with some strategies. He works with our quarterly business review groups with the college universities. And Dan, maybe you can share with the group what you're hearing of what others are doing and what are their activities.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. Thank you. And thank you for everyone for your time today. So the chart that we're looking at, as you can see, has about 750 universities throughout North America and their plans for reopening. I'm actually in the fortunate position that I've got to speak to a few dozen of those universities and can share some opportunities that we've had discussions around. So you can see that the results really are all over the place, from planning for in-person classroom and on-campus housing to a hybrid online approach. It's really all over the place. I think that we can all agree that for the students who are ready to partake in that college campus experience, and really for the fiscal health of the universities, that we'd all like to get back to business as usual as soon as possible. And really, unfortunately, though, I think we can also all agree that really isn't possible right now. There's a change that's going to be required to get us to that safer Campus 2.0 experience. Campus 2.0 is one of those terms I've been hearing quite a bit about. But, pandemic responses are nothing new to higher education. Actually, in the 15th century, the plague was affecting a lot of the area in England. The University of Oxford students created an escape plans so they can get out of the city into the countryside safely. During the flu outbreak in 1918, Stanford University actually isolated any students showing flu-like symptoms and required all students to wear a mask. I mean, does that sound familiar for today's environment, right? 102 years later. University of Montana during the same time actually held all their classes in outdoor spaces. So ultimately, campuses have really been required to evolve in the past, and that's exactly what we're doing today. We're just continuing that evolution of the campus experience. So Campus 2.0 might be more like Campus 2.0, right? Really, how do you make both the students and mom and dad feel comfortable returning to campus? How do you kind of tell people we've made a lot of changes? How do we get those changes into the mind space of our families to let them know that we're building a safer campus? So whether that change is adjusting your dining services or the amount of beds per room in housing, or in the case of this webinar, how package and mail is distributed to students and faculty and staff, college campuses, just like always, will continue to evolve and be better for the future for students. So when we're looking at implementing technology to support our Campus 2.0 initiatives, keeping change management in your mind is extremely imperative. I actually talked to a university just yesterday who implemented a package distribution system for students 2 years ago. It was in a location that was essentially on the outskirts of campus. It was only available for 8 hours a day, right? And when they acquired the technology, they just assumed that students would use it, but they didn't, right? And now that six-figure investment in the technology is sitting there pretty much unused. And we're having conversations with them now because of what's going on about how to replace that technology with ours and implement it to have the student adoption of the technology. It was really a failure, not of the technology, but of the change management that was required to implement a technology in the campus like that. So we always emphasize with our customers that when you're working with your peers internally around acquiring technology and working to implement technology with your business partners, identify a strategy on change management to essentially influence the behavior and the process of both the students and the staff. And as Chris just touched on a little bit on the last chart that you saw, keep the reputation of the university, the fiscal responsibility, operational efficiency, and experiential competencies in mind when you're determining your change management strategy, so you can really maximize the student experience, unlike the example I just gave. And as you can see here, that change management can be all across the board. You might have 6 months worth of change management to plan for, or you might have 6 weeks of change management to plan for. Ultimately, just keep that change management in your mind, because as you can see, the plans are all over the board, but ultimately change is coming, and change management implementation to get as close to 100% efficiency out of technology is really, really important. So in a few minutes, I'll talk a little bit more about some of the conversations I've had around mail and package technology that the university is discussing around North America. But ultimately, again, keep change management and the adoption and evangelizing any change that you make on campus in your mind, so that when your plans for the fall are implemented, you could actually maximize the technology. So with that said, I'll kick it back to you, Michelle.
Dan, thank you very much. I find it very insightful, the fact that you brought up change management, and especially that we can all see from this chart, more than half, majority of the institutions responded that they're really focused on planning for in-person engagement come fall time. And Chris, particularly the initiative that you mentioned about the customer advisory board, I find it very productive for your group to have initiated that, because there's obviously no better solution to for any enterprise to achieve a solution based on the voice of customers. So thank you for sharing that with us. So speaking of customers, and for those that are on the front line, I wanted to turn this discussion with John, Mr. John White at Case Western. And before we go deep, dive deeper into the technology component of it, I wanted to take a step back and sort of share with the group around how has COVID-19 impacted you as well as impacted Case Western the most?
Thank you, Michelle. I think the biggest change that we've had to embrace is how we interact with students and parents. We've always been a face-to-face with students and parents and so forth, but now our health officials are pushing us to rethink that and to change how we're doing things and move away from in-person to emails and telephone calls as we deal with situations. Try to rethink and minimize the exposure between staff and students, and then staff with other vendors who will be visiting on campus as well. So I think that's been our biggest change that we've had to kind of embrace over the last month. And as we start planning for fall, those are the biggest things on our plate to take in consideration.
So now, with that being said, what steps are you and your team taking to establish a safer campus for your students and then also for your faculty as well as the staff on campus?
Yeah, we're moving away from drop-in traffic. We're encouraging students to make appointments, to have individual students come into the office if need be. We're trying to do as much online. We have 2 area offices that serve both sides of our campus. Roughly about 2,500, 22 to 2,500 students in each area. And the biggest traffic is coming in, picking up packages. And so packages and mail. And so, and even when I first got here, that number of packages mailed has been increasing over this time, over the last several years. One thing, when we shut down the campus back in March, which doesn't seem so long ago, but it has been such a long time ago, we reduced from 4,300 students down to 400 students. Our packages didn't change. The number of packages that we were getting weren't changing. The students who stayed here bought greater number of goods. And so we needed a way to keep them out of the area office as much as we can. And so having that package locker system really helped with that process. So we're trying to make sure that we are decreasing lines and no drop-in traffic, by appointment only. And we're trying to do as much business online as we possibly can. Rethinking, we used to have students sign for packages, and now we're not even doing that anymore. Why do we need to do that anymore? We're having students tap their ID cards, so there's nothing they have to touch, nothing that we have to clean, because if we get an infected student, everything in that office has to be thrown away then. And so this way, we're kind of reducing what all they do touch or come in contact with the office.
So John, what made you originally decide to adopt technology to support this mail and package influx of mail and package situation? And then also, you previously mentioned about how this smart locker technology have enforced smart or safe contact between your faculty and then also the students in the way that they interact with packages. So tell us a little bit more around your decision, your motivation back then, and then how has that positively impacted you today?
We started looking this because when I came in 2016, we were seeing a big uptick in the number of packages that we were receiving. Just to give you an example, last fall, in August, September, and half of October, we had about 15,000 packages that came into students in just that short time frame, which overwhelmed the office. We had packages stacked from floor to ceiling in every spot that we possibly could, and then trying to find packages to be able to do that. We had a small bank of lockers. We thought when we first bought it, we thought would be great and we would be able to move everything into that. We were so overwhelmed with packages that it quickly overdid what we had in the technology part and really opened our eyes that we needed more packages just to keep up with that demand. Locker system, excuse me. And so we are grateful that we have those lockers now, because we can now move all those packages into that system. Students can come in and pick them up anytime during the day. They don't have to stand in line. They have very little interaction with the office, as well as the vendors delivering the packages have very little interaction with the office staff as well. They can go directly to the bank of lockers, load them in. Each student gets an email that says you have a locker, here's your code, come get it. And they have a 3-day period to come in and pick them up. And we are able to process so many more packages more efficiently because we did this. And now with the COVID-19 and that need to keep students away as much as possible, it has really come to our benefit to have these lockers.
So John, and thank you for all of those very impactful information that you just shared. We got some Q&A, we got some questions in for you.
Okay.
And we were wondering, so what is your cleaning sanitation procedure around this locker during this time?
We go in and we clean them about 5 times a day. basically we keep an eye on, we have a camera over there on the packages and we can see when we start getting, but we have wipes that are there so students can wipe down before they use it. And we have a sign that says, please wipe after you use it. So we're encouraging students to wipe down the keyboard before they actually touch the process.
That's great. And then also, what is another question that we got from our attendees is, what is the process if the item is not picked up within a period of time, and let's just say 3 days?
If the package isn't picked up within a 3-day period, we send an email back out to the student saying you have to a certain date to come pick it up, or we will take it out of the locker and return it to the vendor who delivered it. But very few. We used to have a lot of students that didn't pick up packages on a regular basis, but when we went to this process, the average number of days it took for a student from delivery for them to pick it up was about 2 weeks. So now with the locker system, it's like 5 hours is the average time span. So it's a shift in rethinking the students that, well, that package is there, they'll keep it and they'll keep it forever. Now they understand they need to come pick it up so we can turn those packages at a higher rate. And we don't have to have as many lockers that way.
Excellent. We're getting a lot of inquiries in from our audiences, so that's really great. And thank you all for your active participation. Some of the questions we will reserve until the end of it so we can answer all together. But one more question, John, is can you share with us an outline of the chain of custody from the vendor to the lockers? Do all the packages go direct to the lockers? And then what about the USPS mail letters?
The letter mail comes into our office. We sort it and then put it out for delivery. But all the packages come in. We are just now shifting USPS to start using the package locker system as well. And honestly, the vendors have been grateful because they don't have to come in and they don't have to do a one-on-one interaction with somebody. They can go in, load the lockers, and then leave. And it's a very easy system for the vendor to be able to load the packages in the locker.
Mm-hmm.
So we're finding that they really enjoy that as well, and are grateful for that as well, especially now.
Good. Great. We're pleased to hear that. John, now what about sentiments from your students as well as faculty? What paradigm shift have you witnessed from, let's say, 3 months ago versus now? And then also, where do you see come fall time when you and your fellow institutions are preparing for opening?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we've seen is the shift of students buying more and more items online. Instead of going to grocery stores and stuff, they're having delivery. We have a number of students who live in an apartment, and so they're buying from prepackaged meals so that they can get delivered as well. And so we're seeing a big increase in the number of packages coming in. And so as we decide what's going to happen in the fall, we really believe that the number of packages are going to still increase in the fall semester. So it's going to be important for us to have that process to limit exposure of our staff with other individuals, and as well as to protect our students as well. And so having them being able to go to a locker 24/7 to pick up a package has made it a lot easier for them to be able to do that, and a safer way of doing it as well.
Excellent. So John, what advice do you have to share with your peers within ACUHO on quickly on either the mindset or specific actions that you would advise your peers to take on in order to safely operate as well as prepare for the reopening come fall time?
Yeah, I believe that if you have not really thought about your mail and your package system, whatever system you have, you need to prepare for an increase in volume, sheer volume of packages coming in, because it definitely will be there. If you have not already seen it by students who are still staying on your campus, you'll definitely see it in the fall. As things start shifting more to online purchases rather than going in person to a grocery store and delivering. I know we get a lot from Whole Foods and from various other grocery chains that deliver here in Cleveland. So I would say prepare for the volume because it's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, speaking of volume, I know even just 30 days ago, Amazon had reported through a Wall Street Journal article that they have experienced an influx of 40% of increase. And even from that, week after week, our digital order as well as package delivery that's been processed by Amazon have exceeded the volume of Black Friday every single day. So that is a testament to the new environment that we're currently under.
And Michelle, I can add also that our health officials or county health officials have seen our package locker system and are impressed that we have this system in place to cut down some of the exposure of interactions with different individuals. So we were pleased that they liked the system that we had in place.
Great, thank you, John. And so before we move on, thank you everyone for all of your questions that you have submitted. We will be answering questions in the time allotted in the end of it. So continue to submit your questions. I just wanted to make sure that you are aware that we will be taking on more questions towards the end of the session. So Dan, I wanted to, previously Chris mentioned about the overall environment. John talked about what's happening at Case Western as well as offered his advice here. So tell us a little bit more in details in regards to the mail and package service challenge, and then also the solution that this holistic, that this comprehensive solution from whether it's partial pending by Quadient or the or the Quadient mail solution provides.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And thanks for so many questions. I'm actually watching them come in as well. It's exciting to see so much collaboration here going on. You know, like I said earlier, I've been in a fortunate position to be able to speak to a lot of universities around North America. And a lot of the conversations that I'm having are around creating that safer campus 2.0, like I talked about earlier. You know, question I hear about all the time. Yeah, what are the technologies we should be considering to support our safer campus in terms of both mail and packages? I mean, the conversation is generally going to three technologies, really. The first one we've already touched on a little bit. John talked about it, intelligent parcel lockers for inbound package distribution. It allows for that contactless environment that we're trying to build, reduces the lines, and you know, makes it for a safer experience, as you can see there on the screen. The second one is virtualizing inbound mail distribution. So how can we essentially virtualize the mail that's coming in into a software environment? I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, and not have to use the pigeonhole mailboxes as we've traditionally seen in higher education housing for the last 60, 70 years, right? And then taking outbound mail to the desktop level. So right now we have a lot of you know, processes to get outbound mail to mail services and out the door to your recipients. And a lot of that, we're having a lot of conversations around how do we create essentially a digital mailroom. Okay, I actually spoke today to one of our most innovative customers at the University of Pittsburgh. Matt Sloan over there, he and I had a conversation. He actually gave me permission to share some of what he's doing as a business partner of ours to help the university reach those initiatives and the goals that they're trying to accommodate for their students. The first one is they're looking at doing what they're calling the ship to pit initiative. And what that's going to allow is for students to pre-send up to 5 prepaid shipment labels. So they're working with one of the carriers. They've actually negotiated with several carriers. They've identified what carrier they want to use. His staff is central receiving. He works in collaboration with housing. And they are going to send 5 prepaid shipment labels out to students that are going to be living on campus here in the fall. They're one of the hybrid environments that we talked about earlier. That chart that I showed, they will have folks there in the fall. I actually thought it was interesting. He told me that the way that they're determining the number of beds that they're going to serve per room is actually revolving around the restrooms. So they have their own restrooms as part of the suite. They're probably going to have more people in a room versus when the amenity of the restroom is shared amongst a full floor or several folks out in a public area. Then they're going to reduce the number of beds in those areas. But ultimately, they're going to use their tracking system to scan those labels in. They're going to send them out to the upcoming students that are going to be moving into housing. And that's going to help with their density spread of the students and their parents during moving process. So they're working again in collaboration with housing. It's a really exciting project. I'm going to be a part of it as well. And it's something that we're really looking forward to helping with. Another one of the universities I spoke to, they are doing exactly what I talked about, and they've already committed to doing it, and they're going to implement it here pretty soon. They're creating a digital mailroom by virtualizing inbound mail for students and faculty and removing all student mailboxes in collaboration with distributing the mail that they're going to distribute via intelligent parcel lockers. Right, so how are they going to do that? Well, there's software out there that allows you to scan in the envelopes that are coming in for students, first class mail or any other envelopes or any other pieces that are coming in. Every recipient receives their own login ID and password, so essentially their own account. They'll scan into the system. It's all cloud-based, so anybody who needs to sort the pieces are going to be able to sort them into different accounts. So let's just say it's me. I went to UConn, proud alumni. And when I was at UConn, I would have my own virtual mailbox for Daniel Graney. As pieces are scanned in, that piece will go into my virtual mailbox, and I will receive a notification via email that says that I have a piece of mail. I'll be able to see the outside of the mail. They don't need to open it up because, again, if you want, grandma or mom and dad send a check, you don't want to be opening things up. But ultimately, they'll be able to see the outside of the piece, and they will be able to determine, based on business rules, if they want to have the piece opened, if they want to open and scan so they can just essentially see it in the mailbox. They can have it delivered to an intelligent parcel locker solution, or if it's something I don't want, I can just choose to have it destroyed. And by destroyed, I mean thrown into a recycle bin. Okay. So another great technology that I've had a lot of conversations around. That is the most hot topic right now in all of kind of this mail and package services out there. The third one, another university, along with University of Pittsburgh, in fact, are virtualizing their outbound mail. So right now, when you need to send out a piece for housing, you're going to send it to Daniel Graney, and you're going to tell me what room I'm in and who my roommates are, all the stuff that we get excited about when we were going into school, right? Right now, I'm assuming that you send the piece out, you print them off, maybe you send it over to mail services. Mail services will run it through an inserter, they'll put it into an envelope, close it, stamp it, and put it in the mail. But that's intensive, and it all happens on campus. Well, there are products out there right now that will allow you to, it's all cloud-based. It will allow you to log in. You'll be able to upload your documents, upload your address book, and select what your transmission type is, whether that is to send a physical piece of mail or an email. And it'll get out the door safely, securely, and again, with as little touch points as possible, because that's the environment that a lot of universities are trying to get to. Limit the touch points and have as much safety and security around the mail pieces and the parcels as possible. So again, the three main conversations I'm having in terms of technology today, that I have multiple conversations with your peers every single day: the intelligent parcel lockers for inbound package distribution, which has been around now for a few years. And to John's point earlier, that the universities that have adopted them have been very successful for the most part, except for that example I gave you earlier, right? Virtualizing the inbound mail distribution for both faculty, staff, as well as, of course, students, and getting rid of those little mailboxes and maybe being able to take back that space so you could continue to create more square footage for social distancing. And then taking outbound mail essentially into the cloud, into the desktop, so that whether you're working from home, your peers are working from home, you're working on campus, for both the virtual inbound mail and for the outbound mail, it does not matter. You just log in and you're going to be able to do all of those processes from the comfort of wherever you are.
Hey, Dan.
Yes, sir.
Hey, just a couple of things before we go to slide. And I wrote down 3 more topics, sneak peek at some of the questions, Michelle. But going back to what we said is the challenge is safety first and then money. So I saw a bunch of questions around this and just 3 things to answer. One is safety. And the question I think some people ask is, okay, so really, how is this more safe? How, on the ideas that we're talking about, making things more safe? And there's a couple things. What's starting to happen more and more, those that have lockers are counting on the carriers to help them essentially load lockers. Not really USPS yet, but other carriers now are loading lockers so it can go right from the carrier to the student. Not everything, because there's some large packages that may not fit in lockers that go in the back, but that's number one. Number two, you've probably heard many different opinions on taking packages into your own home. I know I've got people in my family that don't touch them for 2 days, and I've got others that touch them a minute after it arrives. One of the benefits with the lockers is that you can actually time when you want the package to be picked up. So some schools are saying, I need it to be untouched for 24 hours. So please set the automatic notifications after I load it into a locker, or the carrier does, that I need 24 hours before somebody can come touch it, because that may be a safety requirement that school desires. So there are safety factors that are put into place with touchless, of course, picking up lockers with just the capabilities of a barcode. And as John talked about, it was actually a good recommendation, Dan, that we should do. We should gather up the safety requirements that schools are doing and come up with a benchmark about what is the most common practice for cleanliness of lockers, packages being touched, and we can gather that information and share. The last thing was money. And a lot of questions out there saying, I don't have money. How do I do this? There's a couple things being talked about, including us. There's companies out there that provide lockers that are switching to short-term rentals or subscriptions. So maybe you're not ready to do a major investment, but you need to get started. But you may change the whole thing in a year. So there's opportunities now to do something that don't require long-term commitments. Those options are being discussed today. The second is other ways to generate money from that. So for example, Miami of Ohio decided to do a centralized lockers, all one big investment. And it's worked very well for them. However, they only serve freshmen and sophomores on campus. Once you go off campus, they no longer provide the service, which is interesting because there's certainly a need there and people have gotten used to having that package service. So now there's colleges looking to, could I do it as a fee? Could I charge a fee now? Because I don't want to do that to my on-campus students, because most colleges tell us they can't charge them more because of the housing costs. They don't want to nickel and dime them. But if they go off campus and you're able to put something centrally located and they could be paying for the usage of that to the school, they might be a revenue income opportunity to help offset that. And the last thing was, how do I know what to get? How do I size it? What's the right number of boxes? Well, that's part A of the question. And one thing that I think is we learned from, because we've made some mistakes on sizing lockers, but we now track the volumes and the ins and outs. And John, by the way, very impressive. The average time a package stays in the locker for the 70 schools that we know use lockers is less than 1 day. And you being at half a day roughly saves the investment that you have to how many lockers you need. While we have other schools that average 5 to 6 days, and that hurts their ability to capitalize on the asset. So therefore, not only do you have to size it correctly, but you've got to get the best practices and procedures. How do I make sure the packages are out of the lockers in a short amount of time? And that's sometimes a fearful decision, because you don't want to be loading 100 packages in and then taking 90 packages out and shipping them back. So there's best practices that need to look in from there. So a lot of great questions in that arena. And I think, Michelle, if we want to move towards that direction, we're ready.
Yep. So before we start the Q&A, Chris, let's talk, can we have you share a little bit with us on just the longevity, the legacy of Quadient, or formerly known as Neopost, and then also its expertise in the realm of mail and package solution.
Yeah, so I might get some of my peer senior executives mad at me, but in one sense, yes, some things do matter, but what somebody did 20 years ago may not matter at all. So I think that, we've been involved in college universities for quite some time. We've learned a ton of stuff about mail distribution from essentially, I think, half the college universities either use us or our competitor on the mail side. But realistically, I would say we learned a lot in the last 3 or 4 years on the transition of people with digital strategies for mail, and the volume that John said that said, hey, it's reversed. I used to get 5 times more mail than I did packages, and now I get 10 times more packages than I get mail. And I think the acquisitions that we've made with Parcel Pending to understand the technology options. For example, one idea that a couple of schools are brewing on right now is, can we put a refrigerated locker outside the dorm and have food service deliveries chip in for the cost of that? Because if they want to deliver a pizza, or if they want to deliver food, they're losing a ton of money with drivers trying to figure out if the student's back from the pub to pick up their delivery. And so technology, I think we're looking to make an investment in, and how do we combine systems that deliver mail and packages into the same platform, because they all create the same opportunities and challenges. So I think we've learned a lot by focused on the higher education, and people like John put it this way: we're very humble to learn every year and every semester about the new challenges that the new classes bring. So that's just a little bit of our own little commercial.
Great, thank you, Chris. So we'll move on to the Q&A portion of this of the session. We have approximately around 10 minutes left, and so we'll try to get everyone questions answered. If not, we will make sure to capture your question and then reach out to you separately after the session. The first question that we have gotten a lot of inquiries on are more around product types, and I'll make it into a 2-part question. John, the attendee is curious to know, what is the size of your tower? Because you touched upon the number of packages that you process. So what is the size allotted that you had acquired for based on the volume of your school?
We just added, I would say about 3 months ago, we just added a whole bank of towers. And I don't know, we had 6 or 8 towers on one side, and we had 4 towers on the other side. And the tower has various sizes of lockers in each tower, and they're all connected. And I think we added 7 more towers that we just added over on the north side of campus, where we were getting an overabundance of, but I don't know, Dan, if you know exactly how many lockers we added into this second round or anything.
Yeah, I think totally you're right around 200. I think that we probably added, no, you might be closer to 300 now. I think we added about another 50. I think we started about two systems of 125 each, and we added about another 50 boxes recently.
All right. Okay. So that'll
Great. Yeah, that's very helpful. So the two-part question, the next part is for Dan. Our audiences are very curious to understand more on the product types because space sometimes is a constraint. Refrigerator locker for grocery delivery, as we know that Instacart is exploding right now. So tell us a little bit more about product types that you offer.
Yeah, absolutely. So part of our methodology, just like we talked about change management earlier, is to really understand what we have available to us when we start to take a look at building out a solution. So we have indoor options, we have outdoor options. Outdoor options, we have them ranging from up in the Northeast at Fitchburg State University, where it snowed all over them all winter, all the way down to the University of Florida, where they withstood a hurricane. So we have both indoor and outdoor options. We have refrigerated options as more and more perishable food is being delivered to campus. We have different size parcel boxes. We actually have what we call a parcel room. So anything that's oversized, if we wanted to integrate right directly into lockers, we can have a room that associates to the lockers. We have a lot of options for accommodating as many of the parcels as possible through the locker system.
Okay, great. Now, in speaking of the product types, what about oversized packages? How large would the lockers accommodate? And then also, what is the variation of that?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, of the 60 or 70 universities that we work with that have intelligent parcel lockers today, again, part of our process is to talk about the overflow of the packages. Overflow meaning oversized packages, maybe refrigerated medication that simply just can't be distributed through a locker solution. And we do have various solutions for those as well. So we have inbound tracking software that integrates directly into our parcel lockers so that we can create a workflow for, again, about 98% of packages that are being delivered to universities can go right into a locker. But again, what do you do with that other 2%? It's all a matter of, again, changing the behavior of the students so that they understand that when they receive an email, it's going to give them detail on how to retrieve those parcels, whether it's through a locker system or over a counter or out of a package room or otherwise. Ultimately, it's just about changing behavior and being as communicative as possible with the recipients.
Mm-hmm. How about what about business processes, like the entire process of courier? Would you have couriers delivered directly to the lockers? Is that of an option? And what is the notification process? Is there an online appointment or notification that gets sent to the students to come and pick up?
That's a great question. So the first question there is about the carriers, and we have had some success at different universities with having carriers delivered directly into the locker system. The only carrier that we found that will absolutely not do it is the United States Postal Service as of today at a university. But we have had some universities. As a matter of fact, I think John might have a carrier that delivers in the locker, right? You have UPS, I think, correct?
Right.
And John, I think that was just having a conversation with the carriers, right? And explaining to them, here's our new process.
Yeah.
Here's the new world that we live in. You can no longer dump and run or bring it to an RA desk and come into our buildings, frankly. Right. So it's all a matter of having the conversation and leveraging some of your peers, just like we're doing today, and leveraging some of our customer base to be able to have that conversation. That's all part of our process, is to, again, meet the goals of the university, because a lot of universities don't want the carriers loading the lockers. And that's okay too. That's okay too. It's, again, just understanding what the challenges are and applying solutions from there.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said, what was the second part of the question?
How does the organization of the mail gets processed? Because if all of the students have the same mailing address, how does that work through with a carrier, or does it?
Yeah, great question. So we just recently did a very large project at the University of Alabama, and part of that project that we worked on them with was redefining the addressing on the envelope or on the box. So at the University of Alabama, every student is given a virtual mailbox that has an indication of where the parcel is supposed to go, whether that's Presidential Village 1 and 2 or anywhere else on campus. As everyone knows, University of Alabama is pretty large, of a big chunk of campus. So what we did was we implemented parcel lockers there but we implemented them in a way where the parcel lockers are outdoors and they're going to accommodate what we call neighborhoods. So neighborhoods of different dorms. Same thing we did at University of Florida as well. And then when the student addresses, and this is all information that is given to them in at orientation, it's talked about. There's a website that they have videos and other information. Remember, we talked earlier about change management, how important that is. That's all part of the change management. Implementing the change so that everyone knows, all the recipients know exactly how to address your parcel, or else it might not get to you on time, or it might end up somewhere else. So it's all part of the change management, all part of that documentation that you need to help fulfill via the web or otherwise. Now, the notifications are pretty simple, right? They come via email or text message, or, in the case parcel pending, via an app, and it'll give them the notification that says, parcel waiting for you, and here's where it's located, and here's the hours of operation. Most universities choose to put parcel lockers in a 24/7 location because that maximizes the student experience. And some universities are fortunate enough to have that space right inside of the dorm.
Okay. So we have about 3 minutes left. I'm going to open up for 2 more questions. One of them is software. Dan, a lot of questions that came in around software, and then also the integration with whether it's a parcel locker or a software for mail processing. Can you tell us about the integration behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. So any of the products I spoke about earlier have APIs. An API is really the integration language that's spoken amongst products today. So back in the 2000s, early 2000s, it used to be table-to-table backend integration. We need access into your firewall. You need access into our firewall. Get IT involved. They're going to slow everything down, right? That's not really the way of the world anymore, at least for us. The data that we need is so minimal that we could just very easily implement an API. Again, of the 3 products I talked about earlier, for the offerings that we have an API, and it allows you to have essentially what they call a middleman, so that it's not a direct integration. We don't need access to any backends. We don't need access into your firewall. Your firewall or your systems will push up here. Our system will sit here, and we'll come out and grab information and push it back and forth. That's essentially the modern way of doing integration.
Hey,
Great.
Michelle, can I steal your last question?
Please.
I think there's a ton of questions here, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity, I'm sure, to answer them all if we don't answer here. But one thing I keep seeing a request on is, how do I know the problems that you have on your campus? What are the options to deal with them? What we have available is, we have all shapes and sizes of colleges with mail and packaging challenges, from 100 students to 40,000 students. State schools, public schools, community schools, and rather than us pretend we're really the experts, generally what we have is Dan, myself, and others on the team. We essentially can find other schools that have had the same questions that you all have, and we try and just share the stories and the experiences after they got it, what they learned. So if you have 2,000 students you're trying to satisfy, how much does that cost to serve? Do you have a campus that's spread out, or do you have a central location? All those types of things we try and just match up to the stories to at least give you examples. So hopefully we can answer all these things after the fact. And I see Spencer's up to wind this down.
So we do have a hard stop at 1 o'clock Pacific time sharp. For more information in regards to the Smart Locker, you can visit our website on www.parcelpending.com, and we have a dedicated higher education university page for more details. Thank you for your time today. Spencer, off to you.
Thanks, Michelle. John, Chris, Dan, Michelle, thank you so much for your time. Obviously, really salient topic. When we think of the new normal, the new campus experience, while the amount of packages and mail we're going to see coming to college campuses, regardless of your setup, there's a lot of packages coming your way when students return to campus. So be mindful of that. Hopefully there were some resources shared during this virtual roundtable that are helpful for you in the future. As an attendee, perhaps you connected with someone else in this roundtable that you can continue to share resources with. Great chat today, great Q&A. We have recorded those questions. We'll do our best to follow up with those and get those answers out if we're unable to get to them. with all of our virtual roundtables, this has been recorded. We will be posting this on our YouTube channel and our website once we're able to get it downloaded, edit it, all those things. And we will also reach out to attendees and those who register for the session. We have 3 virtual roundtables next week that you can see below, as well as our roundtables coming up Thursday and Friday of this week. But I am mindful of time as well, so we're going to close out. Thank you again to all of our speakers and our moderator. Thank you for your time and attending, and we will see you online again very soon. Have a great day, everyone.
Appreciate the time.
Bye.